Hello again, Internet. Audacity just crashed. Hang on.
What?
Let's try that again. Hello for the third time, Internet. Or second time, I suppose. Whatever, fuck it. Podcast started. Hello. Don't get your hopes up. Josh Allen, Mike B, things on the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
How are you? How are you? How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I gave the Rift back to my friend today, so I am now
Do you have
Riftless.
do you have postpartum depression?
I'm actually a little pleased I've gotten rid of it because I crunched so hard to get content together and to try different things and to learn as much as I could for the week and a half that I had it. So that's why I'm happy that it's gone, and I'll probably miss it next week or something. It's kind of like when you break up with a girl and you're kind of like, oh man, I kind of, that kind of sucks, kind of bummed, and then the next day you're like, woohoo, kind of like that.
Yeah.
So that'll happen.
Yeah. Like, you suddenly realize, holy shit, I have so much time now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could play other 2D games or
Yeah.
whatever, non VR.
Ridiculous. Non VR games. Who plays those?
I know. Old.
Me. I was actually playing Dark Souls just before just before this podcast. And I know you wanted to hear my story about
I
Dark Souls.
do because I was like, oh, you're playing Dark Souls 3. How's that going? And you were like, oh well.
Well, so what happened was my buddy Phelan, I was like him and my friend High Stakes Jenga have been playing a whole bunch
High
of like
stakes Jenga. What the
yeah. I know him as Flack, but I say High Stakes Jenga. You should follow him on Twitch because that's what his name is on Twitch, and you should follow him on Twitch.
We're always chilling for shit here on
Yeah,
Did
I found a new thing to shill for. But anyway, yeah. So I was talking to High Stakes Jenga, who I will refer to as Flack from henceforth, and Phelan. And Phelan has played a shit ton of Dark Souls, and Flack just recently played through the whole series. So I was like, yeah, I've been thinking about. I'm kind of looking for something to fill some time right now. Maybe I'll experiment with a little something new. I've been thinking about picking up that Dark Souls. There's that new Dark Souls. How you guys feel about that new Dark Souls? I don't really
Is
care
this
about story or
is this
whatever.
how you talk like when you're with your friends?
Yeah.
But when you're at
Yeah,
home
yeah.
with me, then you're like
Basically, I say Dark Souls every 3 seconds. But yeah, I was like, how do you guys feel about Dark Souls? I might pick up Dark Souls 3 because I don't really care about the story that much. I just want to play the game because it seems like fun. And Phelan was like, no, you should start with Dark Souls 1. And I was like, hey, really though? Like it's not as pretty and it's kind of old. And he's like, I just gifted you Dark Souls 1 on Steam. Start with Dark Souls 1. So I've been playing Dark Souls 1 under very adamant pressure from my buddy Phelan.
and you
Yeah.
are at least past the first boss, right?
Yeah, I got past the first boss. I didn't have any problem with the first boss.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently people have problems with that boss, but I don't
I
understand
think
how.
because people try to fight him.
Well, okay, so I started by trying to fight him.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm doing no damage. Clearly, the answer here is not to fight him. So I started kiting him around the room into the pillars and stuff. Maybe what needs to happen is I need him to knock down these pillars. And as I was doing that, I discovered that there was a fucking door that I could walk through. So I walked through the fucking door.
The door to the next area is ready to go.
Yeah. And I was like, lol, lol, lol. I was streaming it at the time, so I was like, I would have been in there forever. And then I came back around. And you get to the end bit of the start where it's like, okay, now you have to actually fight this guy. And I somehow took out half of his health in the first swing. And then I just sort of I didn't even dodge him. I just finished him off. So that was okay, whatever. And people in my chat were like, oh my God, lore's farther than I ever got in this game already. I'm like, really? I've been playing for an hour.
It's totally a mechanic thing. Dark Souls has a very different mechanic kind of approach. Where you have to be defensive, you have to be very aware of your surroundings. I mean, you were using the pillars and all that stuff, you're trying all these different things, and you have a better understanding of I think those kind of encounter mechanics than most. So yeah, I think some people that go in there think it's like a hack and slash, and it's not.
Yeah, it definitely strikes me as a game that's made for people who've played too many video games.
I believe that. Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah, like it's a game that you kind of have to sort of intuitively understand things about it. Like it has sort of quote unquote tutorials, but it's just like text on the ground that you walk up to and it says press right bumper to attack. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And it's like press right trigger to do a heart attack. But it doesn't say anything at that point like if it was trying to be completely noob friendly, which it is clearly not. But if it was if it was a game that wanted to be noob friendly, at that point it would say something along the lines of harder attacks do more damage but expose you to extra attacks from your enemies and can leave you vulnerable, blah blah blah, stuff like that. Only use short attacks if you're feeling frisky, and use large attacks if you're feeling like you really want to put it in or something. I don't know. But it literally just goes right bumper, short attack.
The end.
Right trigger, long attack. Like, oh, okay.
So how far? How many hours have you put in so far?
Let's see. Let me look at my Steam. I've put in 2 hours.
And
half hour of that is trying to get the thing to fucking work.
Right. Yeah. You have the something edition, whatever.
I have the Prepare to Die edition. Yeah,
Yes,
I have it on
yeah.
Steam, like I said. And I have a Xbox 360 controller plugged into my computer, like you do for stuff like this.
Yeah.
And Dark Souls hates it. So it took me forever to figure it out. Like I was reading all sorts of stuff on online. And there was this post that was like, oh yeah, you have to go in and disable the HID compliant game controllers in Device Manager. And I'm like, okay, and I tried that, and it didn't work. So I was like, okay, well that's clearly not my problem. I need to try some other stuff. And so I did all sorts of other things, and then eventually I was like, okay, I'm gonna try that other thing again. I just went in, and basically my thought process was, I'm just going to disable everything that sounds like it might make things work properly. Like everything that sounds like this is something that makes your game controller work, but turn that shit off. Yeah. And that worked for some reason. So Dark Souls, very, very difficult game. The hardest part is getting it to fucking work.
It's a solid port right there.
Well, and then I got into the game and I started playing, like watched through the intro cinematic and everything, and I finally got into the game, and it was seriously like maybe 20 frames per second. Like I heard that the frame rate was low, but I was expecting locked at 30 or something. No, it was maybe 20 frames per second. And it was like heavy motion blur as well. So I was like, oh god, this will not work. So I went and got the DS Fix thing.
Yeah.
Edited the INI file.
Man.
Like
Jesus.
Yeah, like this is, I had to flex some muscles there, some brain muscles that I haven't had to use since like the old days of trying to get fucking like Quake 2 CTF to work. So yeah.
So are you thinking you're gonna play through the entirety of the Dark Souls series?
I don't know.
If it grabs you, maybe?
Yeah, like my thought at the moment is if it really grabs me, then I will. The other thought is like I don't get a ton of time to just sit and play video games.
Mm-hmm.
And I like Dark Souls is one that I 100% feel like I should stream as I'm playing it. Like something like Fallout or whatever, I'll kind of play when I'm just like hanging around, like half clothed on a weekend or whatever. But
Right,
Dark Souls is one that like I want to stream it while I'm playing it, because it's something that people enjoy watching, and because like I want there to be a record of my accomplishments, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that does make it difficult for me to actually put time into it, but I will do my best.
Well, I look forward to progress updates, especially when you get to the second one is a better port, first of all. And then I don't know actually about the third one, but I'm fairly certain that it's pretty good because I haven't heard anything super negative about it. So at least you won't have to fight the controller boss or the INI boss or anything, in the prologue to each of those. Yeah, I haven't. I've played briefly Dark Souls 2, and I've played a bunch of Dark Souls, but not. I think mostly on console. And then I don't know why I bought it for Steam. I think I have like probably 5 minutes or something on Steam. I have no idea, but
Yeah,
it's yeah, it was mostly a console game for me because everybody I knew had it.
Yeah, if I'd done the smart thing, I would have like returned the thing to my friend and been like, I'm not going to even try this on PC because it's on Xbox One now because it's backwards compatible
Yeah.
with stuff through like their virtual store. I don't remember exactly how that process works off the top of my head, but I could have just grabbed my Xbone, plugged it into my capture card, and done it that way.
Oh.
But I didn't, and now I'm doing it this way, and it's whatever. Yeah.
So speaking of consoles,
Yes. Speaking of consoles, that's just a regular old transition. But it's very interesting and worth looking into. Actually, okay. Speaking of old consoles in particular, this Sega Genesis thing that you linked.
oh yeah, please.
Yeah, so Sega is apparently adding official mod support for Sega Genesis games to Steam.
Which means workshop.
Yeah. So like full. So basically, I'm reading this from the Polygon article. It says every Sega Genesis game on Steam, quote, will now feature Steam Workshop support, allowing you to share modified versions of your favorite retro Sega titles. Exactly what that mod support will entail isn't clear, however. Sega community manager Dan Sheridan said that the company will reveal those details sometime next week. So that's certainly interesting. And those games were obviously all very, very modifiable back in the day because that's how like Game Sharks worked and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like that was how things like if you remember the whole Sonic and Knuckles, when Sonic and Knuckles came out, you could like flip back the top of the cartridge and plug another Sonic cartridge into it. So you could play as Knuckles in all of the previous Sonic titles. And that only worked because they were able to just hack every single previous game and say, okay, take this sprite, replace it with this one, done.
Yeah, the biggest thing about them doing this, adding workshop support, is the depth at which you can mod these games. Like, does this mean that I can put a character from any other game, that I animate and port over whatever into like Golden Axe or something? Like what I'm very curious about what the length of, or is it going to be I can just swap out like everything, create a whole new adventure in a game like again Golden Axe, or I think Sonic and Echo and Altered Beast, one of my favorites. I think those are all in the category of games that are going to be available to be modified via the workshop. Or if it's just like, you could just basically, because it's a hub, it's supposed to be kind of like an arcade type system or something. So you can go in there and maybe it's going to be just a whole new, arcade cabinet or whatever, and you can have an entire game that people are going to release on there, which I don't think people are going to do, but still, that possibility with Sega's support, of all things, is pretty interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Like, especially since Sega historically has been kind of very like they've been one of the companies that will randomly decide that they're going to shut down everybody's YouTube channel or whatever.
Yes, exactly.
So Sega now going, and it's also interesting that this info is coming through the UK website, and just understanding how different like regional teams can actually operate. Like it's not coming from Sega of Japan or even Sega of America. It's coming from Sega of UK. At least that's what this article is stating. I guess I should actually double check something here real quick.
Yeah, and the community manager who basically this whole story is like based around, the guy who said it. They're at PAX right now, and they're supposedly going to have more info next week.
Yeah, but what I was double checking was that community manager, and he actually is based out of their UK audience as well, or out of their UK office as well. So it's interesting that it's coming from their UK site, just because you can never really tell which team is really behind pushing things most of the time. Mm-hmm. So that's certainly interesting. Probably just for me, like I'm probably the only one that finds that interesting, but I do. But yeah, it's the idea of now you can mod all of these Sega games It's kind of cool. I'm curious to see what people come up with.
Yeah. I
It
mean,
kind of reminds. Oh, go ahead.
the best part about it is there's gonna be the ability to mod these games. When you go to the indie section, you're basically looking at what are essentially mods and games that are like fully inspired by the games that they are allowing you to now mod.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not even like I understand modding a game like Fallout or Space Engineers or something, you know. But when there's already like a shitload of games, just a bucket or just so many games that are like just in the Streets of Rage category. You know, they're
Yeah.
inspired by that. It's like, is anybody really going to go and spend time making workshop items just for Streets of Rage when there's already a billion games just like it that are inspired by it directly?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could see in something like Streets of Rage having like mods that just slightly adjust the gameplay for it. Like maybe you really like Streets of Rage, but you want to add this other character, or you want to add this kind of weapon or something to it, and experience the game all over again for the very first time. And so other various PR phrases. Yeah, like this actually kind of reminds me of something that I was watching a VOD of this stream a couple of weeks ago, where this guy took Super Mario World from the Super Nintendo, and he like so basically the way that this stream went, it's better if I just describe it in just like leading up to the payoff at the end. He started off, he's like, okay, yeah, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do this trick that kind of breaks the game and allows us to change what the game is storing in memory on the console.
Right.
So he like beat the first level, and then he went back in and he did some weird shit that like changed the color of Mario, and he was like, okay, now we're in ultra mega mode or something like that. And he's like, okay, now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come over here and kill all of these turtles, but I'm gonna jump in a specific spot first, then go back and kill all the turtles, then jump in a specific spot first. And what he's actually doing as he's doing this is writing things into the memory.
Wow.
And as he's doing that, eventually he gets to the point where like, okay, now his coin counter is actually a position counter that shows exactly what position on the screen he's in. And he's going through, he's like, okay, well, what this does is makes this go a whole lot faster. And he's doing all this stuff, and it's seriously an hour of him going to specific spots. And he's essentially like, he has a one of the POW buttons, the ones that you step on that turn the coins into blocks and vice versa. He has one of those and a Yoshi, and he's positioning those two things in very specific locations, going to a certain spot, jumping, and then going and rearranging everything, going to another certain spot, jumping. And he does that for seriously about an hour. And at the end of it, he's like, okay, I'm going to see if this works. And he does the last jump, and all of a sudden he's playing Flappy Bird. Like,
What?
he manually, by jumping in certain locations in Super Mario World, programmed Flappy Bird into the fucking game.
That's incredible. What the
Yeah.
hell?
I'll have to just Google search for it. I'm sure
Yeah,
it'll come up.
yeah. I think I saw something about it, and I was just kind of like, yeah, Flappy Bird, whatever. Like, I didn't realize I think it wasn't really in the headline mentioned so much of what the process was, because that part sounds interesting.
Yeah, if you just search for Super Mario World Flappy Bird, you'll get the YouTube video, which is how I saw it.
Yeah.
And in the description for the YouTube video, there is a link to the full VOD, which is actually really, really interesting to watch.
Yeah.
There are, like, a lot of people will do stuff like this using tools. It's apparently a fairly well-known exploit inside Super Mario World for some reason. Like, I don't know what sort of bug.
Yeah, what circle are these guys in where?
Yeah. But he did it all manually, so it's really, really cool. Anyway, so speaking of retro games, by which I mean speaking of games that are designed for older systems, by which I mean speaking of every game in your current PS4 library, there's apparently a new PS4 coming. Like, we kind of talked about the rumors of this a while ago, but it's now more or less official. I'm kind of wondering if we'll end up hearing anything about it at PAX East this weekend. As usual, we've decided to record this podcast immediately before all the news is going to happen.
Yes. Everything tomorrow is going to happen.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this right now, we had no idea. But yeah, so there's this report has started to circulate a lot, and it could still technically just be a rumor because every site right now is going like you go to Polygon and they reference Giant Bomb, and then I'm sure that essentially this gets back to that NeoGAF thread that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago.
It was like, this is pure speculation, pure rumor.
Yeah.
And now it's like, oh, hey.
Yeah, like if you go to the Giant Bomb article, it just immediately says there's rumors about this, and it links like it just kind of says there's a whole bunch of rumors about this, and just starts listing details on it. So it links to a previous article in which they cite Kotaku. So that like it's literally this just chain of different places are now reporting on this PlayStation 4.5, PlayStation 4K, whatever you want to call it. But knowing that industry, when stuff like this happens, it's usually because they kind of know something. They kind of know it's actually happening. They've heard it from certain people.
Yeah.
They don't want to go to the lengths of saying, we heard this from this guy on this team, because then he gets fired and they lose their insider. So
yeah, when the rumor mill is churning for this long,
yeah,
like we're talking like what 2.5, 3 weeks now,
yeah,
then there's some kind of there's something there that somebody knows, but nobody can disclose it because of blank. And so, and because a lot of these journalists, they know each other across sites, so it's possible they could have in confidence been like, yeah, it's this guy, it's a guy that we know, but we can't really say that because of blank. And so people are like, well, I'll run the story and I'll just say that it's a rumor. Yeah. And that's pretty much it. So but usually it's a flash in the pan. It happens once, and then it's like, okay, and if it's not really substantiated by anybody, then it's kind of like, all right, it's done. But something's definitely driving it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting too. Like, so according to, I believe, the Giant Bomb report, developers have been informed of a requirement to ship titles starting in October with quote-unquote base mode specifications compatible with the existing PS4 architecture and a Neo mode for the updated hardware. So PlayStation Neo is now the sort of code name for it, which is, yeah, because the PSVR code name was Morpheus, so PS4K Neo. It kind of makes sense. At the same time, like the fact that happened kind of makes me believe the rumors a little bit less.
Yeah.
Because it's like every time these are the leaked details of the next World of Warcraft expansion come out, and this is even prior to when I was working at Blizzard. Like we would look at them and go, okay, this is literally just a list of a bunch of stuff someone thought would be cool, and that's never what actually is happening. But anyway, so yeah, the sort of the concept here is that your PlayStation 4 as it exists currently will still be perfectly fine. This is just a upgraded PlayStation 4 that has a little bit more RAM, a little bit more clock speed, and so the graphics hardware is actually fairly significantly more powerful, 2.25 times more powerful than the current PS4 one. And that's because they want to be able to amp up the PlayStation VR capabilities.
Yeah.
But basically what they're saying is that when you buy a game from now on, from October on, if it's been shipped after October, I should say, then there will be essentially two graphics settings. Like, in a PC, obviously, we're as PC gamers, we're very used to the sort of like low, medium, high, ultra like scale of graphics settings. There will be a base mode and a Neo mode. So like low and high, we'll call it, or medium and high, or high and ultra, however you want to put it. So things will definitely look better on the new PlayStation.
Yeah.
Which It's interesting. It's there's a lot to think about with that because a lot of people won't buy the new PlayStation because well it looks a little bit better, sure, but I don't want to spend 400 $500 on a brand new PlayStation for a minor increase in graphics quality. Like sure, it'll look a little bit better, but like Sony is still requiring that you have 60 frames per second on all of your titles. They're still requiring that all of your titles look good. They're not going to let developers be like, well, this really only looks good on the PS4K. It looks like shit on the PS4. Like,
we recommend blank.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, but there will definitely be like maybe the water textures look better on the PS4K, or maybe the particle effects are better on the PS4K, or something along those lines.
No.
Maybe the PS4K has awesome facial recognition or facial not recognition. I forget the terms for it, but like face modeling for we had somebody actually act out this facial expression and then we put it in the game, sort of thing. And maybe the PS4 doesn't. I don't know. There's lots of different ways that could go. It is something to keep an eye on, though.
Yeah, and I think that we're actually about due. It may not feel like it, but we're actually about due for an upgraded, slightly better version of the PS4. And even the Xbox. Because, like, the PlayStation did it, like the first PlayStation. Their first model... Like, their first model was not identical to, like, the last model. They had a number of different models that added different, you know, like, one had, like, access port or whatever and all this other shit. And the Xbox 360 actually released, I think it was, like, a 4-year gap between the first Xbox 360 and then, like, when the Slim came out, that was just, you know, slightly better components. Nothing groundbreaking or whatever. Like, I feel like this is way more like focused on this is an upgraded model, not just this is a slimmer version of whatever or slightly better, more efficient components or whatever. But still, we are about due for a new. It would have either been a PS4 Slim or a PS4 2.0, and that's thankfully we're getting a PS4K and not a Slim.
Yeah, I think the thing about the like the Xbox Slim, or there was like a new PlayStation 3, or the PS1, like not it was actually called PS1, like Xbox One, which was an updated version of the original PlayStation that came out, I think, actually after the PlayStation 2 did, which was weird. But a lot of those were primarily motivated, at least from what I understand, were primarily motivated by let's put cheaper mass-produced components in this, because technology had obviously advanced in that amount of time, and they said, okay, we've been putting in these older components, and these older components are still expensive to produce, whereas nowadays we can put in a chip that's half the size and a third of the cost and sell this thing for cheaper to move more units or make more money off of it, and we'll call it Slim because I guess it's a little bit smaller now. So there's an advantage for it, and we don't have to drop the price drastically as a result of just it's just thinner. That's the advantage, is that it's just thinner. Yeah. Whereas with the PS4K, and apparently Xbox is looking into it as well. Microsoft is looking into it as well for the Xbox One, saying that it might also see some hardware upgrades in the future. I feel like now we're almost getting to the point where these consoles are taking on an approach similar to like Apple. With iPads, iPhones, stuff like that. Like I still have a first generation iPad mini, and it still pretty much runs anything. The frame rates can be a little choppy sometimes. The graphics aren't always as good, but it still pretty much runs everything. Not Fallout Shelter. Fallout Shelter runs like dog ass on that thing, but everything else is pretty much fine.
Yeah.
But I know that if I bought an iPad, the latest iPad mini, I'm actually kind of at the moment holding out for Apple to announce another new one, because it's been a while since they announced the most recent iPad mini. But I know whenever that comes along, it will actually be a significant upgrade. Things will run faster, battery life will probably be longer, things will be smoother, better frame rates, etc. And I know that'll actually be an upgrade once I actually get around to that. And it kind of seems like that's the direction that the consoles are now going in, where yeah, you can still play all the same games on your old PS4, but you can do it better on this new one, sort of thing.
Faster load times. So I looked up your the PS1 thing about the overlap, and it's absolutely true. It was released on July 7th, 2000, and it was the highest selling console through the end of the year, even going on to outsell all other consoles throughout the remainder of the year, including Sony's own PlayStation 2.
Yeah, man.
I had a couple of these. I think I had like 2 PS1s because I kept breaking them because they're small. You carry them around, you know. I definitely went through a lot of screens because I would take them apart and repurpose them for like second monitors. I don't know what the fuck I was doing. But the PS1 was really, really like the perfect combination of size, power, because everybody already had a ton of PlayStation games.
Yeah.
And when you add the screen on it, it was the next best thing to having like an actual handheld unit. I really, really hope that there's like a PS4 one or whatever you want to call it, like a PS4 like fucking folding monitor combo thing that's, you know, super small form factor. And of course they release after PS4K. I'll be okay with that. I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, it's actually not a bad idea. Like coming out with a PS4 Mini, like why not? One that's a little bit more portable, one that you can like. I've joked about this before, but I've actually wondered sometimes if it wouldn't be a bad idea to have a PlayStation that I just use for traveling with. Like,
because we do. There's so many conventions I'd go to, and it's like, oh, where's so and so? He's up in his room playing Destiny.
Yeah.
On the fun, because you brought his PlayStation with him.
Yep. Connect to that hotel Wi-Fi. Get your Destiny on.
These guys are like stepping down into like composite, you know, just to S video, just to get the damn thing to work. But I mean, you know, it did, and you know, there are a couple nights there that we were all piled into a room playing fucking Destiny. I don't even know why.
Yeah, at the American regionals, was it regionals or was it opening week? I don't remember. It was one of the. No, it would have been opening week. At opening week for BlizzCon last year, when we were up in at the ESL studio in Burbank, one of the guys I was casting with, Vihel, actually brought his PC up with him so he could like his actual full like tower and everything, because he didn't have a gaming laptop. He just brought his PC up with him so that when we weren't working, he could play Overwatch.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm actually on board with the idea of it's just more sort of blending between what's a gaming console and what's a PC. Now we have gaming consoles that every once in a while you upgrade it.
Yep.
Like eventually we'll get to the point where they will have components that you can swap in and out. Like they'll just have a like I don't think we'd ever be like, oh, I bought a NVIDIA graphics card for my PlayStation 7 or anything like that, but maybe the graphics, like there would be a graphics module that you could pull out of it and then put in an upgraded graphics module.
They already have that for laptops.
Yeah,
like you just plug it into whatever port it is that they're using for that, and then you have basically a small shell. It looks like a hard drive almost. That's a video card.
Yep.
And you could power all kinds of stuff from it. So I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
A modular system.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's interesting, and it's a good excuse for me to buy a third PlayStation. So,
Jesus Christ.
Speaking of, let's see, which of these should we go to?
I mean, it is actually both of these are PlayStation related.
Yeah. So, I'm gonna jump to this one, I think.
Okay.
So, speaking of PlayStation 4, by which I mean actually speaking of PlayStation 3, by which I mean speaking of PlayStation 3 and attempting to blur the lines between PC and console, by which I mean speaking of CCP's Dust 514 game that was a console game that you played on the PS3, which merged in with EVE Online. CCP is actually coming out with a new first-person shooter that they're trying to learn from the lessons of Dust 514. That one kind of fell apart at the end, but we got there.
Yeah, we got there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so you play. I believe that you played Dust for a minute, didn't you?
No, I never actually played it.
Oh, so I or maybe it was Shizzle. I can't remember, but I did put a little bit of time into Dust. It was okay. It was, and that was the problem, is that it was just okay. It wasn't an excellent shooter, and on top of that, it was PlayStation 3 exclusive. And it was like, everyone was like, what are you...
Why would you do this?
Why are you doing this?
Bear in mind that the PlayStation 3 was, at the time, what the Xbox One was about a year ago.
Yes.
Where, like, nowadays, you still kind of go, why'd you buy an Xbox One instead of a PS4? But a year ago, you would go, why would you waste your money on the Xbox One? Like, not even... that versus a PS4 never even entered your mind. It was, why do you own an Xbox One? What's wrong with you? And that's what the PS3 was at the time that Dust 514 came out. Like, it was still during that, why isn't this on Xbox 360 at the very least sort of time?
Yes. Because, PlayStation was not known for its shooters.
Yeah.
And...
Hey, man, there was Killzone.
Oh. And... even to a PC player, consoles aren't really where you put shooters to begin with. But at least if you were going to choose one, it was going to be a 360. So yeah, the game was mediocre. It felt like a lot of grind. I logged probably 6 hours or so in the game, and it definitely felt like every step was just like trying. I was like, oh man, okay, now I unlocked a fraction of this thing or whatever. And it was just so much stuff to do. And then it was like the whole time it's like, oh, I go to the store and buy this, whatever. And then you're interacting with the EVE universe. And it's like, blah, blah, blah. So thankfully, I feel like CCP is the only ones that could do this. It's like, we made a first-person shooter to interact with our EVE environment, and it sucked. So we're going to make another first-person shooter.
Yeah.
We're going to get it right.
Yeah, I think this quote in this article, which I think this quote actually comes from FanFest, from CCP FanFest. It's from I'm gonna pronounce this wrong. Snorri Arneson, something like that.
Sure.
He's the senior director on this new thing, which I call him Project Nova, and he basically says about Dust 514 or 514. It worked for the people who were very invested in it. It looked cool and felt real, but you had to be a corporation in Planetary Conquest, and you had to have a friend in EVE who really wanted to help you. So you'd schedule a match in Planetary Conquest and say, meet me here in 24 hours and blast these suckers. And that's a pretty high barrier to entry. Like, even aside from the fact that, A, it's EVE, and, like, things are now coming out of EVE, the trying to get the games to work together just did not work well for Dust.
Yeah.
It was a game that Liv actually played a bunch of, and she was trying to explain it to me a while ago, like a couple years ago now. And as she was explaining it, I was just like, I have no idea what none of this makes sense. Nothing ties together here. This doesn't seem like it's sensible. Like, it didn't sound like it made sense. So I really, really like that with Project Nova, they're kind of going, okay, look, here's the thing. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to make a first-person shooter. We're going to make a good first-person shooter. If we find ways to tie it into EVE that work for it, cool. If not, we're going to make a good first-person shooter.
Yeah.
And it's actually really funny to draw that. Like, it's very interesting that this news is coming out the same day as that GameSpot video, talking about Titan and Overwatch, which people like Jeff Kaplan and Chris Metzen say basically the same thing. Like, they don't give too much in the way of detail on Titan, and for the record, I do not like everything that I know about Titan. I knew when we were talking about it on Legendary. I have not learned anything new about Titan since I started at Blizzard.
The timeline leak.
Yeah, it's just, well, and like Jeff Kaplan actually goes into it. It's something that people just don't talk about at Blizzard because it was kind of seen as like this is a major failing of a major part of the company, so people just don't want to talk about it, which makes sense. And I absolutely 100% suggest people go and watch the video because it's really
good.
Yeah, it's really good video.
It's really good.
But basically what they're talking about in that is, okay, we had Titan, it didn't work, it wasn't very good, it sucked. We're gonna take for Overwatch, we're gonna look at what we did with Titan, and we're gonna say, all right, but this bit was pretty good, and we'll hone in on that bit and make a good video game out of that. And it really does show. Like, Overwatch is fucking phenomenal, and I'm not just saying that because I work there. Like, Overwatch is really good. I still play the shit out of it, and I've had it for quite a while at this point. So yeah, it's launching soon, by the way. In fact, there's an open beta in just a couple of weeks, so everybody should check it out. Plugging shit. But yeah, I want everybody to know that I did a double thumbs up when I said plugging shit. Just I wasn't even thinking about it. I just sudden double thumbs up. It was the most important thing I could think of to do at that given moment in time, was to do a double thumbs up to talk about how I was plugging shit. Anyway,
so now the other PlayStation game. I'm terrible at this part. So yeah, it's No Man's Sky is so I said this before the podcast, but I'll say it again. I am flip-flopping so hard on this because it's something that I really, 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 really want to work. Like, I really want it to work. And I want it to be amazing. And I hear something that's like, oh, there's no multiplayer? Like, well, then it's shit. You know?
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, wait, there is multiplayer, but the odds of you finding somebody is basically slim and none, even if you're in the same sector as them, because of how the scale of the place. Okay, that's still kind of shit, you know?
Yeah.
But then I watched that 20-minute IGN video where he goes through, and he's basically sitting there and they're going through, and you could tell the host is like really, really pumped for this game too, which is great. Kind of adds to, you know, your belief in like this could be a pretty fantastic thing. They start off right, and you're basically on a planet, and he does all this shit. He does like a ton of stuff. He does a little bit of like resource gathering. You see a whole bunch of like, you know, of wildlife that's there, a bunch of, you know, these dinosaur looking things. You experience the climate where the suit only has so much thermal protection, and then you start to get cold, and so what you end up doing is crafting this like land demolisher thing that helps you bore a hole into the ground. Now you're in this underground cavern that's actually warmer than outside, so your suit can regen, and then you could go back outside. And while you're in there, you can farm materials or whatever, discover things. Then he finds like this relic, and this relic has like this ancient or this, you know, unknown alien language or whatever. And then he performs an action in front of it, and then he's able to basically absorb and learn some of that language. And then he goes to a base that's already set up where these aliens live, and he's talking to this vendor, and you understand one word that the vendor says to you because you saw that these glyphs on this stone relic thing. This monument, and the idea is this vendor, you know, the only thing you understand from him is traveler, but the more you expose yourself to the language, the more familiar you get with that particular race, the more faction you could build with them, the better deals, the more things you can unlock, the more ships and resources or whatever you can get from that vendor. And then he turns around. You know, don't even worry about watching the video. I'm just going to tell you the whole thing. So then he turns around. He goes outside. He's like, hey, this is a factory, right? You go to the factory, and then he's like, all right. So normally you would try to work your way into this or hack the door or whatever, and there's like resources in there, like a blueprint or something. And he's like, but I'm just gonna blast the door open. So he starts blasting the door, and all the sentinels come around. They're like, oh, and just start zapping them and everything. So he shoots them down. He goes inside. He steals whatever resources there are, and then he goes outside and he dies. And it takes him to like a save point he had just gotten in by the vendor. And then he goes out to the landing pad. He summons down his ship to the landing pad. It seems like he called it a wanted level, and he said he should have waited inside until his wanted level went down. So it sounds like a Grand Theft Auto type thing, right? But he did say that certain factions will sometimes remember that shit.
Right.
So you have to be careful what you do. But then he gets in his ship and he goes up to space, and he just flies. It was all seamless. Flies up to space, And then he looks down from like this space station, and he hovers his cursor over the little cursor on the screen, and he says, "That tiny little 4 pixel wide dot on this giant planet that's encompassing the entire screen, it's engulfing the entire screen. Like that's the area we explored just now."
Yeah.
And and then and then he goes on. He goes on and says, "Okay, now I'm going to show you the scale." And because you talk about you start on the outskirts of this universe, and then you go out, and then he basically zooms out so you can see the whole universe, and he's kind of free flying around this like solar map or universe map. And as he's flying, there's like stars flying by, kind of like Star Trek, when you hit warp and like the stars kind of fly by you like that. And he says every single one of those stars is its own system of planets that you could go and explore. And he says the worst thing about this game is that 99.9% of these planets are probably not going to be even discovered, and the discoveries are cross network. So that's where the crossplay comes in. Is that you can go and you can find something, you can name it. So the scale is huge, and the way he demonstrated in this 20-minute video, like by the end when he's flying through all these stars, I was just like, what the fuck? It was insane. It was insane.
Yeah, like, so here's my thing with No Man's Sky. Everything you just described sounds amazing. Like, everything you just described sounds really, really super cool. And I think for me, the best parallel I can draw is actually to Minecraft. The way that I play Minecraft, and I know Minecraft, No Man's Sky, they're very, very different games, very different, like, purpose to each of these games. But for me, the draw of Minecraft has always been, I get this random procedurally generated world that I can go and explore in. Like, the exploration side of it is what's really, really fun to me, because it's like, oh, man, cool, look, there's this, like, cool land bridge over here, or I found this spot with this big waterfall, or check out this desert, it's totally rad, because that's a thing that I say apparently. And like just going around through Minecraft and finding all these different areas, and like this is cool. Oh, there's a bunch of sheep over here, this is where these sheep live, look at this little place that these sheep have. Like, I half the time, every once in a while, I get on a Minecraft kick and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna play Minecraft again, and I just find myself wandering around the world and not actually ever doing anything, and eventually I starve to death or I get killed by a creeper or something. But yeah, like, that's how I've always enjoyed Minecraft. But the drawback for me has been, like, when you do have a Minecraft server, you kind of discover everything and then it's done. And then for me, like, that's when I start to get kind of bored with Minecraft. Is, okay, I know everything there is around this place. I'm over it now. I've done a bunch of Minecraft servers with like friends and guildmates in the past. In fact, actually, I think you and I were playing on one with a few of my guildmates at one point ages ago. And it's always something that I kind of start doing stuff with. I start building a thing, and I'm like, I'm kind of over building this thing. I'm gonna go explore. I go explore. I get lost, and then all my friends have built cool stuff, and I'm like, all right, well, whatever. I'm done. For No Man's Sky, like the way that everything has been described about No Man's Sky, it really sounds like it could be that sort of game where the exploration doesn't really stop. Like, it's like you're saying, there's millions of these planets, billions of these planets potentially, and the guy's saying 90% of them will never ever be seen. And I'm sure it's all procedurally like there isn't some artist somewhere slaving away over billions of planets that no one will ever see ever. So I'm sure it's all procedurally generated, but that's okay for me. Like, it's as long as the way that it's generated feels organic and natural enough, then I can go to this planet, I can look around on it and be like, okay, this is cool. But if the multiplayer, if it's not something that I can meet up with you or Shizzle or other friends of mine and just say, dude, I found this cool thing, let me show you this cool thing I found, then I'm significantly less interested in it.
Yeah.
Like, I want to be able to
give
go
you coordinates to like these monuments that you can learn these races and be like, hey, let me show you where it's at.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I want to be able to go, hey, dude, I found this really cool place. We can, let's team up and raid this factory or whatever. Like, oh man, I found a cool thing over here. Let's group up and explore this thing or something like that. Mm-hmm. I want to be able to grab people and play with people. In something like this, and it seems like it would be so easy for that to be the case. And then you see things like we were talking about earlier in Skype. Like you see the guy, I forget the guy's name, but one of the developers going, I mean, like he keeps getting asked about multiplayer. He's like, that's really not what the game is about. It's really not how to think about the game. It's like, it's supposed to be a sandbox title, man. You're not supposed to tell me how to think about the game. The whole point of a sandbox title is emergent gameplay. If that's what I want to do, just tell me if I can do it or not.
Exactly. Yeah, a simple yes or no would be great.
Yeah.
The things I fear, there's two things. One thing is actually during the video, when he goes up to space, he says, and the way the game works and the way the game is able to do all this is we're now in space. Everything behind us is now thrown in the trash. Like I think he literally said thrown in the trash or thrown in the garbage or something. And he says, when we go back down, it's regenerated. So that kind of spooked me a little bit because as he's like plugging away and poking holes and everything, the first thing that popped in my head was, oh, Jesus Christ, the world size, like, because in Space Engineers, when you pop a hole somewhere, like that adds to the world size, right? The file size. And so as he's in there like plugging away at holes, I'm like, don't plug random holes. Your hard drive's gonna explode, right? but he said that now it's all in the garbage, and the host didn't really, I don't know if he really didn't catch it or whatever, but it seemed to me like that could be, he could either say it's no longer in RAM, right? Like it's no longer there and currently cycling. It's kind of written to disk, whatever. But it could also be taken as now I go back down and it's regenerated. It's almost as if I never was there, except for maybe the names of the monuments, and that's pretty much it. So if I go down and I dig a big ass hole, or I draw a big dick in the sand, right, that I could see from space, when I go back down there, is it gone? That's one thing that I'm worried about. The other is there's only so many races and so many ancient languages and so many different types of assets and animals and stuff that we can see. Like, I don't know what their character creation or their mob generation process is. If it's like, okay, well, we have different classifications and they generate these kinds of bodies to make a species, and then these types of heads and these types of beaks. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But like, I think of it as from like the Mass Effect standpoint, specifically Mass Effect 1. When you'd go down to a planet and you would explore, it was really cool to go down to a planet and then find like some Prothean thing, or like maybe there was like a Quarian dig site that was overrun, you know, and you have all these logs and stuff like that you could look through, or you find like a random monument thing with some writing on it, and you get a little bit of stuff in your codex. Discover it. Like, even in a game as large as Mass Effect, there was only like 20 races, like 20 active races. And beyond that, that was pretty much it. And a lot of them were very, very, very minor. Like the Hanar, right? This one feels this way, right?
Yeah.
So I'm worried that there might be a limitation where it's like, well, I've explored 20 planets. I've literally explored every different type of asset that they have available to me. That's the thing that scares me, I think, the most.
Yeah. It'd be really cool if they had something like in Spore, where there's just a character or like a creature creator, and when you create a creature, I don't actually remember if this ever actually made it into Spore or not, but like you could see creatures that were made by your friends, like they could be ones that were attacking you or whatever. Like, I could actually see a situation in which they have like a creature creator sort of thing, or a livestock creator sort of thing, but maybe works similar to Spore, maybe works differently. That the general community could be like, I made this creature, and it gets uploaded into the servers, and when you go to explore a place, there's a chance that it is one of these creatures that random people have made. So that way, like, use the powers of UGC to give yourself a little bit of extra gameplay. So that way it's not eventually, oh, these guys are this shape. I've seen this shape before 40 times.
Yeah, exactly. Here's the same animal that I found on 15 different planets out of the 16 that I've already gone through and explored. Yeah, I'm worried about the depth. Like, the scale is huge. There's no doubt the scale is massive, even if it's procedurally generated. Right? Yeah, there's a million planets, but 999,000 of them will never be generated.
Yeah.
But what is how far down does that go? Like, I get it, like vegetation types or climates or whatever, all that stuff is part of it. Is it a more liquid surface than it is, land based, or is it all completely frozen over? Like, yeah, those are variables, sure, but what is the limits? Just in our own solar system, there's such a wide in the 9 planets or whatever, or 8 plus Pluto. There's there's such a wide variety of different types, just right here. So that's the depth is what I'm most concerned about with the game.
Yeah, I agree. I similarly am concerned about this game.
So I'm like, woohoo, maybe.
Yeah, it's the concept is really, really cool. I am very confused by a lot of stuff that's been said about the game. So at this point, I'm just kind of like, well, we'll see. Once it comes out, we'll see how it actually is. Or once people can actually play it, we'll see how it actually is.
Yep, exactly.
So speaking of No Man's Sky, by which I mean speaking of a billion possible planets, by which I mean speaking of one guy working forever in order to actually complete all of these planets. By which I mean speaking of violations of every possible labor laws. You heard about this whole Alex St. John thing, right?
Yes, I have.
So this kind of ties into it's something that's been sort of bubbling in the game industry for a long time. It's the gaming industry has so basically this guy came out and said, among other things, he said that game development employees are, quote, wage slaves who have, quote, embraced a culture of victimology. Essentially saying that people who are in game development positions don't care about actually earning money. They just work because they want to work. And they should quit whining about getting fair wages and quit whining about working extremely long hours during crunch time and just do it because they like doing it. And after all, quote, pushing a mouse around for a paycheck, end quote, isn't really hard work. Basically, he said a whole lot of really, really ridiculous shit. And so the game industry for a long time has just had this sort of, yeah, that's just how things are. Once you get to a certain point in development, it's what we call crunch time. And then you're going to work 80 plus hours in that given week. You'll be working all sorts of overtime. You're not going to be paid because this whole thing happens, your normal wages aren't going to be particularly compelling because you're going to be paid overtime for all of this, obviously.
Or, if you're fortunate enough to not be salary.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people will be on salary, and there's actually laws like in California that specifically apply to software development that say like for salaried employees, like salaried employees are owed overtime for once they've worked past a certain amount of hours, unless they're in software development.
Yeah.
So it's like that's how deeply bullshit this thing actually is. And there are certainly, like, don't get me wrong, there are certainly reasons that crunch time ends up happening. A lot of them are due to, a lot of them honestly are due to that's how it's been, so that's how people plan nowadays. Like, it's just the sort of like, well, there's going to be crunch time, so we will just plan around this crunch time. And we will say that at this point, this is when we're crunching, and that's when we're going to get a whole bunch of shit done. A lot of it is due to like I know at certain companies, and this does include Blizzard to an extent, the thought process is, well, we don't want to hire on because the needs of game development after a certain amount of time, they grow exponentially. There's a point where early on you can only really have a few people working on a game, and then eventually you get to a point where you need a shit ton of people working on this game to get everything finished. And they don't really want, there's a point where you don't really want to hire on another 400 people to finish your game and then fire all of them as soon as it launches. Like that's also a problem that happens with a lot of companies in the game development industry. And there are certain companies such as Blizzard who don't want to do that. So as a result, crunch time happens because, like, okay, yeah, we could hire a bunch of people to reduce this crunch time, but then we'd just have to get rid of them later because we wouldn't be able to use them anymore, and it's not fair to them to hire them for 6 months and then fire them again. So it's definitely a complicated issue. That said, you probably shouldn't say things like game development employees are wage slaves who've embraced a culture of victimology, and that pushing a mouse around for a paycheck isn't hard work. I fucking can't push a mouse around for a paycheck. Are you kidding me? Like, I can't do any of the shit that all of the people on the WoW development team do. So, yeah.
So, a little bit of history on Alex St. John. So he worked for Microsoft back in the mid 90s or so. Him and a super small team of dudes are actually the guys that came up with DirectX. And they did it. So Alex St. John has always been Mr. just Mr. Rebellious, almost in like a neckbeardy fashion.
Yeah.
Right? Or something we would consider today neckbeardy. Back then, probably rebellious. He actually went to Microsoft and was like, hey, we have this idea for this thing we want to do, because the problem that gamers are having, and John Carmack would attest to this, is that these guys are making games and they're not making them work on Windows because it runs better on DOS, because they have direct access to the video resources, the resources needed for video. And that's where the name comes from. DirectX is literally direct access. And so they wanted to create a medium on the Windows platform so that people would make games exclusively for Windows. So Alex St. John was part of that group. He actually went to Microsoft. Microsoft was like, yeah, that sounds dumb. And so he's basically like, fuck you guys, we're going to do it anyways, without the resources, without the permission. And they built it. And they were able to basically, they built it there at Microsoft, and they were able to make it happen. So prior to this, you may have looked at him. You may look at this guy like, okay, he did a lot of great things that were considered, again, neckbeardishly rebellious. And then he goes on later. I don't know how much later, but he wrote like he made some comment that got published about basically how Microsoft doesn't have their shit together or something like that, and he ended up leaving or getting fired. He had lots of stock options, and so he basically made out like with a ton of money. So he's rich. He doesn't have to worry about money.
Yeah.
So knowing this, and then reading his article that he wrote, his blog or whatever that he wrote, he is that workaholic. Like, he is that guy, or he was. He is that guy. He basically says that's what you need to be successful. And you don't have to worry about money. You shouldn't have to worry about money, because he doesn't have to worry about money.
Yeah.
Because he comes from that era of, these rebellious people that are now was like, wow, you just Mr. fucking Defiant, oh, fuck the system. Okay, go you. That's what he thinks works today. That does not work today. It is, when you read that article, it reads almost like a parody of some sorts, because it is so outlandish by today's standards. And then of course did you see the slideshow?
No, I didn't.
The slideshow is even worse, because this guy is clearly an HR nightmare on top of everything else.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find something here. Like, there's a couple of things in here. It's like, okay, yeah, I could see that mentality 20 years ago, sure. But let me see if I can find this thing about wives. Well, so he makes a lot of comment about women in general, right? Yeah. And then he makes comments about, you could find these people who are, I wish I could find the thing here, but you find somebody who is borderline like autistic, and that's like the person you want to keep on board or whatever. Like, he's so good at coding, he's basically almost autistic or whatever. It's like this whole thing reads just like a huge, massive HR nightmare and total 90s style approach to tech, not just gaming, but just tech in general. And I think people today have a right to look at this and be like, wow, what are you doing? Like, at this point, he's basically showing that he's a dinosaur with this. That his approach to things that maybe worked, quote unquote, 20 years ago, they're not the way things are now. And he's basically pushing it like this is the standard.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think it's just pretty clear how much this guy has no fucking clue what he's talking about, and has no fucking clue about the actual challenges that face people who are working these ridiculous crunch time hours. Like, one quote from him here is he's talking about how people quote rant about the value of work-life balance, which he put in quotes to sort of like signify, oh, work-life balance, what even is that? Like,
read in whiny voice.
Yeah, exactly. How hit games can be delivered on a schedule with quote-unquote proper management, and how they can't produce their best work when their creative energies are tapped after a long 40-hour work week sitting at a desk. Apparently people can even burn out working too hard to make video games. Like, what kind of fucking stupid shit is that? Like, first of all, no one's complaining about a 40-hour work week. There is not a single game developer in the industry who will complain about a 40-hour work week. Like, 40-hour work week is nice. That's like, I get to go home, I get to sit on the couch, I get to drink some wine, I get to take my weekend off. Like, 40-hour work week is great. Excellent. Perfect. What people are talking, and this is why he has no fucking idea what he's talking about here. It's the 80+ hour work weeks that are the problem. Like, it's the point when it's 80+ hours for months, every week for months, with no time off, no days off sometimes. Like, it's literal like slave labor at a certain point. Like, it's kind of bullshit. Yeah. Like, and saying, like, oh, apparently people can even burn out working too hard to make video games. Fuck you. Fuck this guy.
It's here's a guy who was a workaholic, and then he made a shitload of money. And now he's become removed. Like, he's disconnected. And he hasn't aged, like, socially, I believe, culturally, since that point. And I think probably the most interesting thing about this, because I mean, no one's gonna look at this and say, this is gospel, baby, right? No one's gonna look at that and say this. If anything, it's just basically another insight into the way that certain things are run behind the scenes. Like, this guy is saying things that are actually being said, we just don't see them all the time, right?
Yeah, this guy is he's an indication of a deeper problem. It's not just one guy going on some weird rant.
Yeah, exactly. I think probably the biggest thing I took away from this was, what is it that we're doing now that we're going to not be able to let go of, that in 20 years we're going to say something and there's going to be this huge backlash and we're going to be like, what the fuck? This is totally fine. This is the way it is. Like, it made me wonder about that.
Yeah.
Because that's the way it is. Like, the way every 20, 30 years, like, there's something that we did 30 years ago that's like, whoa. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Blazing Saddles. Really great example.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, these are, and it's something that, like, I'm somewhat hesitant to even say this, because political arguments, I always go great. And everyone's always really happy about politics on the internet.
Vote Trump.
Yeah.
just wanted to break the ice.
Yeah. Just go in soft on that one, yeah. But no, like, a lot of discussions that have been coming up lately is the whole, like, well, you should just go to college and get an education and then you'll be fine because that's what I did 40 years ago thing. And there's a lot of really, really interesting stuff you can read that shows, like, with actual math and statistics and, like, raw data, like, 40 years ago, yes, that was an option. Nowadays, it really isn't, because college costs so much and the job that you get pays you so much less comparatively, counting for inflation and all of that, that nowadays going to college, getting your degree will put you in debt for so long that you're just barely paying that off when you start thinking about when you're going to retire. Like, it's a mess. And it's the sort of thing that people who haven't been keeping up with that and aren't familiar with the way that things work nowadays can just easily say, yeah, no, just do what I did. Go to college and get your degree and get a nice job and you'll be set. Because that's what I did. And that just something that doesn't work nowadays. And it's so hard to convince people like that there is actually a difference. And I feel like St. John here, Alex St. John, he's very much in the same boat. Like, to him, crunch time was something that you did for maybe a month, and you went from 40 hours to 50 hours a week. Like, that was crunch time back then. Maybe a little bit more than that. I'm probably understating a little bit. But back in those days, like, crunch time did not nearly mean what crunch time means nowadays. Like, I've said 80-hour work weeks a couple of times. That's actually low for what happens in a lot of development studios. You start getting to the point where it's literally go to work all day, go home, sleep 6 hours, go back into work. And sometimes people don't even bother going home because
they don't go home.
Yeah, like that's less time that they could be working, basically. So you end up sleeping in the office for 6 hours, getting up, going right back to your desk and working again. And that's no way for a human being to live. Like, I don't want to play a video game that had that go. It's the whole like Blood Diamond thing, right? Like, I don't want to support that practice. If someone had to do that to make this video game, I feel dirty playing it.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I definitely agree. Like, he's just kind of a dinosaur. He doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's indicative of a large problem with, because a lot of the people in leadership in game development studios. I'm fortunate in that I work for a game development company that does not fall into this trap and is not defined by this. But there are a lot of studios where the people that sort of quote unquote work their way up the chain think that the way that their subordinate employees nowadays is just what they had to do back then, where it's like, oh yeah, we just sat around and we talked about programming and we just figured it out and it was totally fine. And then we'd bust out a few lines of code and we'd call it a day, and that was crunch time. Like, no, this is fucking staring at spreadsheets for weeks.
Yep. Compiling, testing, broken, do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you're compiling? You don't get to take a break while you're compiling. You get to turn over to your second computer and start typing on that one instead while you wait for your code to compile.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, going back to the like what is things gonna be different, in the future, right?
Yeah.
Like which one of us is gonna be Alex St. John, right?
Yeah.
They're gonna be like, nah, man, we always did things this way. What the hell are you talking about? Actually, Sonata in chat actually just brought up a good one, like education and medical. Like, that's gonna be something that we look at like differently, and I think that's true. I think that a lot of people, they're in so much in debt. Guns actually just say he just finished his 4 years and he's $56,000 in debt, which is like, that's a whole lot of there's a whole lot of people.
That's, if you're lucky, your entire first year's salary.
Yeah. Oh God.
And you're obviously not going to do that. So
no, you have to intern first.
Yeah.
You have to work for free.
Yeah.
Everything on that front, I could totally see that being like one of the big things, where that's something that somebody will find some way to basically St. John it in in 20 years, Yeah, it's I think that's probably the most interesting point. I mean, again, I don't believe that anybody's going to look at this as gospel. I think it's definitely something to look at and say this is indicative of a deeper issue that we have in the games industry, or not the games, the tech industry in general, which the games is a spinoff of. But I do think that it is kind of interesting to then look at, what is it that we're going to be St. Johning in 20 years or so? What are we going to look at and say, what the hell?
I think one of the really interesting things about this Alex St. John thing, though, is that his daughter Amelia, who is a software engineer, she works with Drupal for I found the company here, a developer called Energy Circle. It's basically technology tools and services. Basically, she's a software engineer. She's in this industry as well. He had so many like misogynistic things to say about women. And kind of, he was actually like using a picture of her in his slideshow, I believe. That his daughter,
both his daughters.
Yeah. One of them, Amelia St. John, basically came out and called it like a horrific toddler meltdown. And like, she was like, yeah, no, my dad is full of shit. She has such a great quote. As his toxic waste trash fire not only is associated with my last name, but also my face, I felt compelled to respond to my father's sexist, ableist, and racist rants. It's like, okay. And that's That's sort of, I guess, the sort of upside of this, the upswing on this is that, yes, this guy is an asshat. However, there's a new generation of software developers that aren't, right? Like it's something that I think will improve, and just outbursts like this and ridiculous shit like this happening is the sort of thing that draws attention to it and makes people start going, okay, yeah, no, we should actually think about this a lot more. Maybe crunch time isn't this sort of fact of life for game developers. Maybe it is something that we should be thinking about. How do we resolve crunch time? Is there better ways for us to develop different tools or different processes and so on so that we don't have this issue? I know it's an extremely complicated one to solve, and there isn't a simple, oh yeah, just make things take longer, or
no, you can't. Not when all these hands are in. Like you have to communicate with PR and marketing, who are like, okay, we need a date, and you're like, well, we want to actually like make the game first. It's like, no, we need a date. We got to start pushing this now. This is how we do it. Blah blah blah. And it's like you can't. And then you settle on a date. The date's always too soon. Yeah. And then once you build a platform, you start getting all these ideas and everything you want to put in this game. And then all of a sudden you have feature bloat, and it just starts to take off. Yeah, that's why crunch happens. Mismanagement and too many hands in the pot, or whatever the term, cookie jar. No, that's not it. Whatever. Chefs in the kitchen. No. But
not enough chefs in the kitchen, so your existing chefs have to work 400,000 hours a week.
Yeah. It's something that I think what's probably gonna kill it, and we may be killing it right now, honestly, is early access, because early access doesn't really necessarily rely on hyped release dates. You know, like early access for most games kind of happen unless you're in those circles and you see like the developer talking about it or whatever. We see more betas. Betas are basically demos now. Demos for like the live products, pretty much. They're not really betas, and so games that are going out that want to do actual betas, they're basically touted as alphas. And so I think things like early access and our disdain for most early access games is going to help kind of change the way that we do marketing, and marketing is going to be tailored around that. Like somehow that's all going to twist together, and it's going to kind of somehow find a way to balance.
I do think that there's sort of like there's the public's attention span that has to be sort of worked around as well. And so when something comes out in early access, like H1Z1, still technically early access, I think people are over that at this point. H1Z1 could quote unquote launch, and I don't think anyone would really care. Like they would not get that big PR marketing splash that they really want, because early access was that splash. And there's an extent to which you kind of can't really control when people start getting really excited about your product. Like looking at Twitch as an example, you can usually see like the first day that a streamer can stream a beta for an upcoming game that people are excited about, that's when it's going to get the biggest viewership, regardless. Like when Overwatch first went into, it was extremely closed beta. Very, very few people were actually in it, but there were some streamers in it, and they were allowed to stream it. So instantly, Overwatch, top of Twitch for ages. It did really, really well on Twitch for a little while. And that was like completely, like the only way to have stopped that from happening would have been to just say, no, streamers, you cannot stream this game. You are not allowed to stream this. And yeah, it's kind of an on or off sort of thing. There isn't like a build up to this, oh, we're just going to ramp up and we're going to be at like 12th on Twitch for a while. No, it's like if your aim is to be 12th on Twitch, what's going to happen is you'll get to 12th on Twitch and then never go above that ever. See, it's very, very difficult to work around that, and that's part of why I think the crunch time thing is problematic. And also, like, there's games like World of Warcraft, for example. Like, people expect expansions at a certain cadence. They expect content to come out at a certain cadence. And if crunch doesn't happen, like I say, Blizzard is not the worst about crunch. It's definitely on the good side of the gaming industry in terms of crunch time. But there is still a crunch time. And when developers are in that crunch time, it's because people are saying, we need content for this game. We need to get stuff out for this game. It has been too long since we released something. And at that point, you don't really have the option of saying, it'll be fine. We'll just we'll go another 15 months without content. What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah. Yeah, the early access and the initial burst, I think is something that's going to, and I think it's potentially one way that they can kind of start to kind of milk this a little bit, like from a marketing standpoint. If I were to architect the marketing scheme for Space Engineers, it would go like this: first release a creative space only with the asteroids like they had, building game, right? Sandbox building game. And that's what they did, and it got a lot of traction. And then release, later on, the next biggest thing was planets. If I was the mastermind architect, that would have been the plan from the beginning. It's like we could double dip on this, and have. And then the next one would be like the best netcode you've ever seen. Now there's like 64 or 128 people playing in one single server, and it's amazing. There's economies and all kinds of stuff. Like that'd be the next big push.
Yeah, it kind of needs those sort of it's a whole new game now.
Yes,
sort of moments.
Exactly. And even like Minecraft had that. Minecraft was just creative mode, and then they added survival, and I think probably after that they added I think multiplayer was actually in creative, and then they added survival or whatever. But regardless, like there's always like these bursts, like here's how we could just continue dipping on that. And that thing was in beta forever, It's the new renderer for DayZ. That's another spike they're going to get.
Yep.
So it's all about like managing. And I'm telling you, like, this is a way that they could do it. So that way you not eliminate, but you mitigate this horrific crunch time type schedules, especially in some of these smaller dev houses, because the larger ones are kind of bound by corporate limits and whatnot, and they kind of have to abide by the laws a bit more, I think. But you mitigate a lot of that by almost indefinitely extending out your dev time, your dev cycle out to basically infinity.
Yeah. There's certainly ways to mitigate it. I don't know that it's something that, due to the nature of building a thing, you can really solve unless like maybe the fix is that there start to be organizations that are almost like temp agencies for game developers, where you say, okay, your job is to go in and we will take a week to train you on what you need to do, and then you're going to be the extra 100 employees that this title needs to get out the door in time for its release date, and to get everything finished in time for its release date. And then that contract will end at the end of that. That going into it.
It's like working seasonal at retail.
Yeah, exactly. Like you go into it, like I said, like there could just be, and I think a lot of development studios actually are doing this already, where they're actually having external agencies do things like, okay, well, we know that we're going to use Unity as our engine, for example, and we're going to need art assets that work with this. So here's our art style. Here's the things we need you to build: a bunch of different trees. We'd like 40 different trees. We'd like 100 different boxes, and we'd like 83 different creatures. Go. And you send that to a art agency, and they say, all right, we make a bunch of stuff. They send it back. You go, oh, we don't like this one and this one. Fix this, etc. You work a little bit back and forth on that, but it's just an entirely temporary thing. Maybe there needs to be that sort of thing for engineers and for programmers and for scripters and so on, like that can say, okay, here you're going to use this industry standard development tool, like say it's Lua or something.
It happens. It's outsourcing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're gonna work at this for a little while. Like maybe outsourcing is the answer here. Honestly, you're gonna work on this for a little while. It's gonna get finished, and then you're gonna pass it back over to the original development team. That development team never needs to swell up to 800 people and then fire 600 of them once the thing's out the door. And the 600 people just move on to another project for another development team.
Yeah, stateside outsourcing, please. But yeah, it does.
Send it all to China. I hear they have great work ethics over there.
I worked closely with a company that's not around anymore, but they used to outsource a lot of stuff to Brazil, and I actually didn't realize there was such a huge like dev push in Brazil that were able to, a combination of like artists and everything. Like it was like anything you wanted. It was like, yeah, we just sent it to Brazil. I was like, oh, really? Like any art style you want. He's like, yeah, they could replicate that and they could pump it out. Like, what do you want? Animation? What do you want? This and that, whatever. Like, you come up with the ideas, we send it down there and they get it done for cheap. And that's just the way that, this particular company worked.
Yep.
And that's something that, like you're saying, like this seasonal work, like seasonal consulting positions to bring in people, or maybe don't even have to bring them in, but you just outsource to them. It exists. Unfortunately, majority of them are overseas. But it still exists.
And I think also like this made me think of something else as well. Like there are game development companies that are based in countries like this crunch time issue is primarily a United States issue. There are game development like CCP is in Iceland. Supercell is in Finland, I believe. Like there are game development studios that put out really, really good stuff in countries that have extremely strict work-life balance laws behind them, like using France as an example, just because it's one that comes to mind. There's several game development studios. Actually, no, we'll use Finland as an example, because that's where Supercell is, and they are they're the team behind Clash of Clans, Clash Royale. It just came out. They're very, very successful. Boom Beach, a whole bunch of stuff. Very, very successful company that's just sprung up in the last couple of years, and they're based out of Finland, which has, as I recall, I'm obviously not an expert on Finland's laws, but they have some very, very strong laws in terms of like you have to have like 28-ish days of vacation every year. You literally cannot work more than X hours a week. Like the idea of double and triple overtime is just, that does not exist. If that happens, then that company gets fined. And these countries still, like the UK is another one that has some very, very pro-worker laws behind it. Things like maternity leave. Like you get a year of maternity. You have a kid, that's a year you don't have to work.
Oh, God. Let me tell you, that's something that we fail at so bad.
Seriously. Like you've had a kid. You know this. You know that having a year that you don't have to work after having a kid would be really, really nice. And that's just how things are over there. And there are more and more and more and more every month game development studios starting up in countries like that. Somehow or another, they still seem to be putting out titles. Like, yeah. Obviously, this crunch time is not necessary.
Yep. Excuse me. I'm just gonna cough for that there.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it is an issue that's going to be difficult to solve in the United States of America, but so is every issue in the United States of America, apparently. So
that is true. We can't get shit done sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh Jesus.
It's actually really funny. So obviously I'm on the World of Warcraft community team.
What?
Yeah. No, it's crazy. Mm-hmm. And we have a European community team as well. That we tend to, we don't work super closely with them. Like it's kind of like we have our NA community, they have their EU community, and it's kind of managed separately like that. But I would say a few times a week there's something that we kind of need to work together on. Like, okay, there's this blog post that needs to go out, and we want to make sure it goes out at the same time to everybody around the world. Just use that as an example. And they're based in Versailles in France, which has amazing labor laws. Like it's such a great place to work.
Like 4 days a week or something. Like
yeah, I think it's like 32 hours is like the max per week or something. I don't know it exactly off the top of my head. I know that they have over 30. I'm pretty sure I'll say they have over 30 days of vacation time, mandatory, absolute minimum in a given year for every single employee. Doesn't matter what you do, you have to have this amount of vacation time. And they have a ton of bank holidays on top of that, public holidays on top of that. And it's like every once in a while I'm like, okay, we need to send this over to EU so that they can get it like localized into all the different languages and so on, so we can put this out. Like it'll be Monday and I'm like, yeah, we need to put this out on Thursday. And it'll be like, oh, well, they're not in the office for the next 2 days. And this happens fairly regularly where it's like, oh, it's Armistice Day, so they're just all out for 2 days or something like that. And I always kind of catch myself going, God, that's annoying. Don't they do any work over there? But then, like, in the back of my head, I'm like, as soon as I have that thought, it's immediately followed up by the thought of, man, that would be so nice. Like, not having to work. Like, I love my job. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely love my job, and I probably do more work than I really should anyway. Because, like, I'll get home and be like, oh, there's this going on, there's that going on. Oh, I need to check my email and so on. But it's just like, it's one of those things that you think about it, you're like, actually, yeah, that's probably better. Like, actually, that I probably would prefer that, to be honest.
Yeah, it's really hard to, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I need to go.
Yep.
It's
you have
getting
a
late and I have to
trip or
drive to
something.
Utah tomorrow.
Why are you driving to Utah?
Bajira's getting married.
Oh,
Yeah.
hey,
Bajira
nice.
and Warcraft Jen are getting
Please,
married.
not like Salt Lake area.
No. I
Is it
believe
like
it's the
Saint whatever
St.
it is?
George area.
Oh, good. That's way closer then.
Yeah. No, it's only about a 6.5 hour drive.
Yeah, it's like basically you drive past Vegas like
Yeah.
5 minutes and you're there.
Yep.
So
Yeah, so it's not too bad, but it does mean I have to get up early.
Mm.
So I need to go and like pack and stuff.
All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your whatever. Yeah, go have fun.
Yeah, I'll do that.
All right. I'll see you, man.
See ya.
Bye. Later. Wait, I gotta get the Skype sound in here.